Thank you so much. So, namaskar and good evening, Bharatwasiyon. I, Shefali Samgal from Young Minds, Noida, welcome you all to this 37th webinar by HR Milestone. HR Milestone, a community of 3,200 plus professionals from Pan India, is led by Dr. Harish Chaturvedi, a very dynamic person. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it takes a lot of efforts to do 37 webinars and still going on. You know, talking to speakers, finalizing the topic, making posters, making meeting, organizing the meetings, keeping a track of new participants who have joined for the first time, it takes a lot of efforts. So he is a true leader who is putting so much of efforts for the community. A big round of applause. Everybody is on mute, so I'll just clap him for him. So, you know, during this journey of talent hunt on for a speaker, there he found Mr. Jonathan D'Souza from Amche, Mumbai. So Mr. Jonathan D'Souza, he's an HR under 40. He is heading the group talent performance and rewards for Welspun Group. He's an industry veteran with 16 plus years of experience and worked with organizations like Hutchison SR, Tech Mahindra, and others. Mr. D'Souza did Global Executive MBA program from ISB, Corporate Strategy program from Wharton School, Ethics and Stakeholder Communication program from Kellogg School of Management. So today he'll be talking about realizing business realities by enabling performance. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. D'Souza, and over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Shefali, and thank you so much, Dr. Harish. Dr. Harish is very warm. When we first spoke, I was referred to him, and very cordially ensured he called me on a Saturday, Sunday, and we kind of fixed dates. And he's been very, very warm as a person. I've been lucky to have about 3 or 4 conversations with him. And, even on the topic, he wanted something which is linked to HR. Although I don't relate too much to being an HR professional now. I mean, I always say that, I kind of more relate to trying to support business, ensuring that business functions better and, we reduce the number of issues which defocus people on HR. So when you talk about employee experience, one of the things you want to do very, very fast is ensure they know what they're supposed to do. And that's where performance management plays a very critical role. And that's how we got talking, and that's how this topic. I know it's a Saturday evening, it's 7 p.m. So I will ensure that we keep it light. I will not be a professor. I will come more as a practitioner. And some of the challenges we all see in performance management, especially now and after COVID, how will this change? So I'll keep it a little light. I have about 15 to 16 slides, but I'll run through them. I will not talk about academic concepts of HR. I will largely talk about, the challenges we all face in HR because the business keeps asking us about, and performance management is largely an HR subject. So I'll largely speak about that, speak about the way I see it. When I started my career as a management trainee 17 years ago, I started with performance management and moved to competent. So it's one of the closest topics I have. And I really love the way it has evolved over time. And that's the entire effort and attempt this evening. So the way I planned it is the first 20-25 minutes, I'll run you through some concepts, but not academic, but how does it look in real life? And the remaining time, we can have questions. I will also keep looking at the chat. So if you have any questions, you can put it on the chat and I will give you my perspective of how I've dealt with it. Whatever I discuss, performance management is very cultural in nature. So whatever I discuss is more broad perspective of the various companies I've consulted with and I've worked with. So there are multiple learnings over a period of time across multiple industries, and they don't really reflect Welspun necessarily, because I've been in Welspun for a very short time. It's just 5-6 months. And yes, because of COVID, a lot of these concepts are changing much beyond, and I'll try to bring that in mind. So Dr. Harish, can I start? I know I've given a long start already, but I will just once you give me a go ahead, I will probably share my screen and then do a voiceover, and then we take it from there. So do I have your blessings, Dr. Harish?
Yes, yes, always up. Start. You can start now.
So I'll just share my screen. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
So whatever the reason we chose this topic is that, today business is changing drastically, and ever so more, when I started my career, I remember very, very clearly we used to do a 5-year planning. By the time, so when I started in 2002, 2003, there was a concept of a 5-year business plan, and we used to manage performance annually. So we used to make an annual plan, which is to be a roll down and roll up into a 5-year plan. And performance management was an annual affair. Used to set goals, used to do performance, used to do training needs analysis, and used to run for a year. And generally, our career planning succession used to run for 4 to 5 years as a program. Over the years, a lot has changed. Now, whenever I do any presentation, the first thing is to set context. And like any senior business meetings, generally people ask you, what do you mean when you say performance? Can you define what do you say? So I thought, let me just put the slide to define what performance means, just to set a context. Although everybody would have a different definition of it, I thought, let me just pick up a very easy definition. So for me, performance is more of a completion of a task, activity, or a goal within a time frame by utilizing skill, knowledge, ability, and available resources. So very, very clearly, it's trying to do something within a defined time frame with the available skill, with the available knowledge, ability, and the resources. I think as we've seen the world progress, resources, culture, collaboration, all of these are types of resources, including financial capital and human capital, right? So they are all resources in my, in the way I look at life, right? So doing things with these resources, with a goal in mind and completing on time, to me, is what can be measured and what can be called as performance. So if there's performance, what is performance assessment? Performance assessment is nothing but, validating that if I've done something good, bad, ugly, or could have done better, uh, you know, and what have been the working conditions in which I've been able to deliver. So basically, it all depends on a lot of factors over and above what you've set out to do, how you do it, and could you have done better. Very, very clearly, there are two schools of thoughts on doing things. One is the perfectionist way of doing things very perfect, and the other way is doing things which is appropriate. Now, I'm a big believer of being appropriate and not necessarily perfect, but you have another school of thought where a lot of people will extend timelines for the same goal because they want to do it perfectly well. The way I look at life and the way I look at business is that no business is perfect. The environment keeps changing. So the actions we take need to be, while they need to be thought through, we always have to keep in mind that when we are measuring performance, what was the context of the business or the working conditions within which you perform. This is one of the most important reasons, because when an incumbent goes out and a new incumbent comes in, the new incumbent tends to always check the previous incumbent's performance, which actually is not an apple to apple comparison, because the context has changed from the old incumbent to the new incumbent, and the company has changed over a period of time. This is one of my most favorite sentences in life. What gets measured gets done. I always believe that to set a really good performance management system, generally has to be promoted from the top. And one of the most favorite quotes I use in office is, "Agar CEO MD का नजर हटी, दुर्घटना घटी. In simple English, it simply means that as soon as something is not measured, or as soon as something loses priority, you will see a dip or a drop of that activity. And in a long term or short term, if you're measuring it, you will see it doesn't have priority, so the performance also will suffer. Now, why am I talking about this? It's because our measurement criteria over time has changed. And to understand why the measurement criteria has changed and how performance management has changed, it is very, very important to look at how the industry has evolved. So this slide has industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And over the last 2 years, 3 years after digitalization, we all talk about industry 4.0. Now the whole focus on this slide is to understand how did the industry evolve and has our performance management really evolved over time, right? So industry 1.0 was the start of when we realized that things can be mechanized, power can be generated by steam, and the hand loom shifted to a power loom or a weaving loom, right? It is probably very close to when Ford manufactured the first Model T, which was an assembly line. So that was industry 1.0, where capital was available and manpower was available. As Ford started, a lot of other industry and lot of assembly lines started, and steam energy converted to electrical energy, which meant that there were further industries which came up, and that's where competition started coming up, right? So industry 2.0 is very, very clearly when productivity, cost, unit costing, and all of this started getting measured, including financial capital, right? So as soon as you started measuring these things, competition started coming in, and that's the beginning of performance. And obviously, you also had the world wars and the British, the way the British trained soldiers and all. So a lot of the learnings from the world wars and from the way armies were set up, World War I, World War II, a lot of measurements and a lot of those parts came into the way industry started getting set up. Because remember that a lot of mass production started thanks to the World War I and World War II, where a lot of these factories were set up to actually provide equipment to support the wars, right? So a lot of that also came in, and that brought a lot of discipline in industry 2.0, where everything could be measured. The assembly line concept, where you have to do one part of the whole project and you don't know what the other project is being done, and all of that started getting measured. Cut number 3 is probably when I was born in the early 80s, is when computers started coming in. I remember 1984-85 when the computers started coming in, and a lot of mechanical work started getting automated, and then there was the first round of automation. A lot of electronics started coming in. While all of this was already researched in the army, military, a lot of it started coming to mass production, and computers started becoming a core part of the jobs. And here is when you could actually now start looking at a lot of data, right? If you actually put a timeline to it, so a lot of data started getting generated, a lot of rudimentary data, but the measurement criteria started coming in. And if you remember really well, where we all studied in college, maybe 20 years, I studied 20 years ago, the GE way of measuring, the GE way of bell curve, and all of that started taking shape. Management thought started taking shape in a very big way. Now, one of my experiences of industry 3.0 is that a lot of the performance management systems belong to this era in a large way, because of computers, because of corporate offices, because of root cause analysis and all the various statistical tools which started getting available to manage and monitor performance. And that's where productivity also started coming in, because now you had a lot of data to predict productivity. Simple example, one of the earliest, when I started my career, is in a BPO or KPO in 2002, is as part of the hiring, we used to measure words per minute, typing speed on a computer. And anybody who had a 35 words per minute typing speed would qualify for the interview. And we would say that if this person can type at 35 and above words per minute, this person can do really well and perform really well in the BPO. That time it was web as well as voice. So this person could take notes, put notes in 5 minutes and also finish the call in 5 minutes. So that was one of my earliest ways in measuring when I started my career, that how we used to track productivity by typing. And a lot of people used to do typing tests and they used to learn to type as well. And that's the most simple example I can give. I will not yet go to Industry 4.0 because now I will probably pick it up in the second half. But just to highlight what is happening in Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0 is completely a connected world where today manufacturing, automation, Uberization, there's a lot of data and unstructured data. So when I started learning about data, a lot of the data had to be formatted and structured. We would have a lot of teams who would do a lot of the data formatting, structuring, and present it to management. So you'd have huge MIS teams. Now a lot of the data, which is unstructured, gets a meaning because of machine learning. So that also ties into a lot of how performance is measured, and I will throw some real life examples as I progress from my previous roles. One of the most important questions is, if performance management system was built to win, why most of us struggle today, and why do we think it's become very ineffective? Right? And like I started off earlier saying that, when I started my career, 5-year business plan was the norm, and a 10-year strategy in a country was a very big thing. So I would hear a lot of MDs and CEOs say, we have a long-term plan to stay in this country. We will spend 10 years, 20 years and build this. For example, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. When they talk of entering a country, they would talk about 10 years, 20 years, and we will invest over a 10 to 20-year period. And a lot of the business plans actually belong to that era, saying that over a 10, 20-year period, we will build the entire industry and their business as well. Now, a lot of the gaps in performance management has happened because of the rate of change. And I'll move from 2000 to maybe 2008, 2009, when the first slowdown happened. And when in 2000 the dot-com bust happened, one industry fell, which is the IT industry, had a problem, which is the earlier e-commerce model, which was a dot-com model. In 2008, it was the financial services industry largely, which got affected. And that happened after a span of 8 years. In 2008, when that happened, business planning started becoming a 3-year rolling plan. So you've seen a 10-year come to a 5-year to a 3-year, with performance management now being looked at on a half-yearly basis from the earlier 1-year period. So you could see a crunch beginning to happen around 2005, 6, 7, 8, and it started getting more active in 2010, 11 when industry started coming back. As time progressed, you've seen another credit crisis in 2012, 13. During the credit crisis, whenever there's a crisis, people start measuring things more accurately. I remember one of the lessons which I picked up from Adil Maliaji is he said that whenever there's a slowdown compared to growth, people perform better because everything gets measured because of fear and because of high focus. So whenever there's a slowdown, you have to focus only 3 or 4 things compared to when there's growth. When there's growth, you have to measure multiple things because there are multiple things happening in the economy. But when there's slowdown, you will see a credit crunch, you will see cost. So everybody starts talking cost, cuts, capital, ensure you use capital well, ensure you use labor well, ensure capital and labor is productive. So there are 2 sides of the coin. Whenever you will see a downturn, you will always realize that performance gets measured much, much better compared to whenever there's growth. Because during growth, the focus shifts on multiple avenues and multiple growth streams. And hence, the top management gets defocused on core issues. Now, that is one of the reasons why there's a gap between strategy, planning, and review mechanisms, because most of us since 1991 have largely seen growth in the Indian economy and globally as well because of globalization. So a lot of the performance management suffers is because companies don't track against their long-term plans. And today the definition of long-term is probably 18 months to 36 months. Then people deliver multiple things on the job. And I'll explain that in the second half on why people deliver multiple things. For example, today we have to do business as usual, and we also have to do cost management, and we also have to do digital transformation. Now these are multiple things, and they tend to confuse a lot of the top management because of prioritization. The third one is the loss of transmission or translation, which simply means that if the top is not clear of what they want to do, then the focus shifts on managing effort, right? So if you're not clear of what you want me to do, and if I'm not clear what I'm supposed to do, there is going to be transmission or translation loss, and people call it disconnected. Sometimes we'll call it ये ऊपर से आया है, मुझे नहीं पता कहाँ से आया है. Now this is because it talks about clarity of thought, clarity of purpose, and clarity of goals. And the last one is when there's no clarity, or when there are too many things happening, when data is not in place, systems not in place, when top management is not aware of bottlenecks. When this happens, a lot of resources get lost, or a lot of the resources are not utilized to the optimum. For the simple reason is that there are too many ideas, but either poor execution or poor communication, poor technology, or poor transmission. Anyone or all of them can come at the same time. One of the most important things which I think the IT sector and the pharma sector and the FMCG sector solved fairly well is the transmission of business goals to function, team, and individual goals. Now, and I want to talk a little about this on how culture and multiple cultures play a huge role into this. One of the critical reasons that business goals don't cascade is because, a lot of the companies, Indian MNCs, have a very cultural twist to it. For example, MNCs generally will set their goals internationally and transmit them locally. So most of the goals are probably set internationally while the execution happens locally. Now, because of that, the understanding of the business context in India, for example, an MNC operating in India may not understand the ground level realities. And hence, they would generally have an overarching goal which needs to be met as a corporate, but they may miss the local goals. And for that, you need to really finely balance these goals. Then it's about what do I reward? So I've worked in a European company. I've worked with ING, which was largely European. When ING was number 1, number 2 in the world in financial services before the financial crisis. ING as a company, the performance management system was largely MBO and balance scorecard based, where we used to reward team performance. We would not reward individual performance, which meant that if you want to grow within ING as a company, your effort as a team player was always higher than your effort as an individual. And hence our reward mechanisms and our performance measurements also focused on how well we collaborate. At the same time, we used to hire a lot of people from Citibank, for example, which is an American company. Very, very culturally driven to the great American dream, saying that if you're good, and if you're a great individual performer, you will grow faster. And I know a lot of my ex-colleagues and friends who come from Citibank who really grew really well because they were great individual performers, right? And I would realize that both these companies came because of the cultural build of either Europe or USA. Now, if you ask me about how India is built, from my experience, and I'm smiling about it, I think India is built a little bit very differently. In my knowledge, very few companies in India are very, very process oriented. And what I believe is India is more of, a shortcut, jugadu, innovative, small innovations kind of a country. I'm using the word jugadu positively, but there are negatives to it as well. Positively, jugadu simply means that how can you do things fast by cutting short a process. compared to countries where process rules the way work is done, right? So our measures of performance in India have a mix of Europe, US, and our own way of thinking. And that's why we see that we are not able to translate objective setting in a very, very clear way, for the simple reason that, we have our own ways of thinking of how we should perform a job. Like when we were setting goals in ING, for example, about 10, 12 years ago, I had an MD from Japan who had come in. And he told me that in Japan, when they set goals, they are very clear that if a goal is set that you have to do it in 5 minutes, you cannot do it in 4 minutes. It is not acceptable, which means you have cut short a process or you cut short a protocol. Same way, you cannot take 6 minutes to do it, which means you have missed something. And he cited an example saying that even the quality of milk and the quality of pasta in Japan, which is made on the street side, will be of great quality, because even the chef on the street will ensure he puts time for how long he boils the water and at what degrees the water will boil before he puts in the pasta. So that was one of the examples he cited. And this is an Indian who spent about 20 years in Japan, this gentleman, and he used to talk so proudly about quality compared to execution. Right? So these are the cultural differences, and culture, even today when we all discuss culture, culture forms a major part of performance, and I'll discuss why as we progress. One of the things as professionals which I realized and I picked up early on is finding contradictions of performance. Because when you go to set performance management targets for individuals and teams, you will find a lot of contradictions. And let me speak about a few contradictions as we progress. So the first one, as I spoke, is business planning and culture, like I explained. The second one is financial terms and non-financial terms. Now, as we grow higher in the company, we become P&L managers. Whether you're in HR, which is manpower cost, cost of hiring, cost of recruitment, whether you're in finance, where you have to talk about your capital costs and how well you're managing money, your sales and marketing, how well you're driving the top line and the bottom line, versus non-financial terms, which means that customer, how many customers do I have, how many customers onboarded, how much, what is the long-term customer value, things like that. Now, a lot of people, because they grow in a function, and because, even in our colleges, we don't learn finance as a subject across the board. A lot of the middle management and junior management who start becoming senior start struggling with converting financial and non-financial terms and tying them together. And this comes largely because of the way we are educated and the way we start our careers. Even when you do your MBA, for example, if you take an HR specialization or you take a marketing specialization, you learn accounting and taxation and costing only in the first year. That too, maybe for a couple of hours or a couple of sems. Right? So you're only learning the basics, but you're not learning that when you want to do HR, how does your action translate into a financial outcome? Now, that's one of the critical reasons where you see contradictions when you set goals of people. The next one is the goal setting itself. So there are multiple theories of how goals should be set. Some people say, let's take an academic view, जो मैंने last year किया उसको 10% से बढ़ा दूं. And some people say that let's set goals by thinking big, which means I will not look at what I did last year, but I will look at the market size and I look at my capabilities and set goals and then build the resources. Now, isme there's no right or wrong, right? It depends on how comfortable are you in setting goals, because if you don't set the right goals, you cannot cascade goals downwards, which means that as soon as you can't set goals properly, you do not know what to review, you do not know what to manage, and you do not know what to measure. Then there are interdepartment goals. Now, a prime example I will cite for interdepartmental goals is an auto sector example, right? Sales versus plant operations. Now, most of us will know that the job of sales is to sell, but every salesman will come and ask you for discounts offers, because customer will push the salesperson to give discounts. And in the last many years, because of e-commerce, every Indian mentality is of going and shopping only in sales season. However, if you look at the plant operations of an automobile sector, the plant heads KPIs are largely revolving about productivity, ensuring material is converted to end finished good, ensuring finished good is not in inventory, and also ensuring raw material cost and logistic costs are maintained. Now, you will ask me, why do you say that interdepartment goals are contradicting? So let me give an example. When the sales, let's take an example of an automobile company which is struggling to sell a good car or a car, and where dealers are pushing for a discount. Now, what is generally happening is the sales guy will come and say that ये कार जो 6 लाख की है, ये अगर आप 5 लाख में बेचोगे तो ये बिकेगी, and he will give a prediction, right? Now, based on that prediction, manufacturing will go and manufacture, keeping all the costs in place, and then the sales guy will come and say that we need to give further discount. Now, when this is being done, the job of manufacturing is to ensure they use, as a function, they will use complete capacity. However, what you're building at complete capacity is not selling in the market. And hence, when you give a discount, your margins will go for a toss, and you may be at break even, or you may sell the product at a loss. Now, this is one of the critical reasons why you will see that these two goals are not talking to each other. Because if you don't reduce price, then the sales guy has to give the right number and a lower number to manufacturing, and then manufacturing has to probably manufacture at probably a higher cost, but not sell at a discount. And this is one of the reasons you will see airlines, automobile sector, whenever there's a cyclical dip, there's deep discounting happening, and they write off a lot of loans, they borrow a lot of money, and they declare losses. And it's largely because the goal setting is not reflecting the environment. It is a reflection of capacity. Another example from my previous, when I was in the mutual fund industry with ING, is that, every fund manager has to generate high returns, because when you invest, they are measured on returns and risk. Now, all of us laymen don't bother about risk. We think that we give money to a mutual fund manager, उसका काम सेंसेक्स या जो भी बेंचमार्क है उससे ज्यादा पैसा कमा के हमको देना है, मैं तो फायदा क्या हुआ? But I also learned during that stint that every company has benchmarks and also has guidelines on how much money can they keep as cash at any point of time. What it simply means that when the market is going down, a lot of fund managers tend to sit on more cash than buying stocks, and hence they can generate a little better returns than the benchmark, compared to a fund manager who deploys all the cash, because the fund house has decided that at any point in time we will generate consistent returns, and hence a fund manager cannot sit on more than 5 to 10% cash. Now, both these fund managers will have a different performance in a short term, depending on the market. But if you see in the long term, if you look at a 10-year, 15-year period, the fund manager who consistently puts money in the market generates better returns compared to the fund manager who sits on cash and chooses when to deploy. And there's a lot of data around this. However, because you measure performance in a 1-year period, the fund manager who's deployed a lesser cash and generate better returns will get a higher performance rating and higher bonus compared to the fund manager who's actually followed the guidelines. And this was one of the things I learned when I was heading HR for ING in the mutual fund segment, because we used to keep asking that how do we compete with the other fund houses? And this was one of the things, not everything, but this is one of the critical aspects which I learned. Then there are other places where measuring performance becomes very, very difficult, which are innovation centers and R&D centers, where you keep on trying to devise a product for years and you have many failures, but then you have one good product or two good products and your story changes. So there are a lot of contradictions. I think one of the jobs or one of the key roles of HR is not only to understand how to put a performance management in place, but to also study or search these contradictions. And I spend a lot of time in my company and in my previous jobs as well into understanding how these contradictions happen. And if you are able to find these contradictions, you can always highlight it to management to look at, saying that, is my goal setting creating chaos or is it a lot of clarity? The next question is, what should we measure? And this is one of my favorite slides. Should we measure process or should we measure outcome? Process talks about how do you do things, while outcomes are what should we do? What is expected out of you? So for me, outcome is what is the goal? Process is how do you go and do that goal? Do you cut corners or do you stay in line with the code of conduct of the organization and follow process and yet deliver? My view, and if you look at the slide, it talks about outcomes, talk about results, recognition, rewards, which are resources, and satisfaction and accomplishment. While process talks about us going to work every day, ensuring we follow through, we make notes, we spend time, attention, energy, and we also become better as we keep doing something. And that is how most of our graduate trainees, most of us have grown. We've done something over time and we become better at it, and that's how we grow. So in short, we give outcomes faster because of our learning curve. Now, I see a lot of performance management systems which are of industry 3.0, which are largely linked to measuring attendance, measuring time spent in office, measuring time in, time out. ये 9 घंटे डाला है क्या? अगर इसने 9 घंटे नहीं डाला है, मतलब इसने काम नहीं किया है. Now that is true in a manufacturing setup, but you have to clock in time and you have to clock out time, right? But a lot of our jobs in corporate or white collar jobs, measuring time is like measuring the process. It will not measure the outcome. For example, sales, number of cold calls a day, that is a process. By measuring number of cold calls a day, you cannot measure whether the sales guy will be successful or not. Yes, it will tell you it's putting effort. And I see a lot of our performance management systems from industry 3.0, because industry has moved slowly at that time between 2.0 and 3.0. We are used to measuring effort. We are used to measuring effort and also rewarding effort. Rather than, I remember cases where 15 years ago, if you left office early, people would say, "Isne kaam nahi kiya, half day ja raha hai." But actually, in industry 4.0, this entire thing is changing, because measuring performance has become more complex, and measuring outcomes is, becoming more and more complex because of collaboration, newer tools, and all of that. But we need to critically look at white collar jobs, largely, which you can't measure productivity because people are sitting in front of a computer. On how do you measure performance? And I believe the best way to measure performance is looking at outcomes and looking at inputs. Outcomes means I have to do X in X amount of time, and input means that do I have the right tools, right systems, right data to do it. Example is, when you prepare for a meeting in a company which has very poor systems, you will take 5 days making a presentation and then presenting that information. And by the time you complete your review, you have lost 10 days of time. So you have only 15 days left to now improve performance. Compared to a company where everything is system driven, so you know your last month's performance, in 2 days you can decide and look at how can you improve performance and what should you do right. Right? So a lot of people, I see 80% of leaders measuring input, measuring effort. It is good to measure effort from intent perspective, but from a performance management perspective, measuring effort does not yield results. This is one of my favorite slides, and it's a crux of what should we be measuring in industry 4.0. So every organization has 2 parts of the story. One is short-term performance and one is transformation. Short-term performance means that I will grow year on year 10%, 20%, 30%. Transformational performances, I will change the way I work. I'll change the way I do things. I will change my customer experience. I will change my employee experience. I will change my shareholder experience. Right? Now, all of us and who, at junior level, everybody is focused on short-term performance, which is right. But as you go mid and senior level, you will realize that apart from your day job, you are doing a lot of projects which are for the future of the company. It is like building a bridge and also operating the road at the same time. You can imagine how difficult it is. कि रास्ता भी बांधना है, flyover भी बनाना है, और उस signal को भी on रखना है, क्योंकि heavy traffic flow है. Now this is where middle management and top management suffer the most. And हम बोलते हैं ना बहुत काम है. And this is where performance management needs to evolve, right? Because what generally happens is the short term is always measuring profits, revenues, and margins. So a lot of our time and effort goes on that key because companies are listed. Every quarter there are results which are coming out. So you cannot drop the ball. However, the second part of the story is how do you manage transformation? And there's only one, the same person is doing transformation and the same person is doing day-to-day job. So the industry 4.0 performance management has to also focus on transformation, where you manage growth and you manage risk. You manage innovation and you manage investments. Technically, it is nothing but how do you create value for the company as time passes. Profits alone don't create value for the company. The way a company can sustain over the long run is very, very important to create value for the company. In a simple sense, it's that why do investors look at companies and why do they pay a premium for the stock which can generate value over the long term? And this is the same story which has to now come into the organization. And a lot of organizations manage both these aspects really well, are able to actually outperform their peers, and you'll also see a lot of your team members who can do both projects, special projects, and also manage their day jobs, do really well. Now, to do both of these, it is very important that goal setting is done in the right fashion. So how do we shift to success? How do we now look at moving from performance to contribution, and why is it important? Let's first ask the question of what is contribution. To me, in my head, contribution is nothing but evaluating the success of an individual on how do I contribute to my function or my organization goals in a real-time basis. It simply means that with the use of big data, industry 4.0, ML, AI, can my reports be so auto-generated that I don't have to go and measure performance, but I just can understand that I started doing A and I finished doing A in 1 month. And if I could not complete it, what went wrong? And should I be doing it, or should I take another target, which is fail fast? Now, sorry, my voice is lost. So one of the important things is one of the most important things in performance management is to align individuals to the organization and the functional goals. And today, with so much of business change, we do not have time of 6 months, 1 year to go and review performance. Hence, performance management has to now become real time, and as real time as either daily, like in a BPO in a call center, or monthly, like in most businesses. We are looking at monthly targets and looking at, are you on track? Are you off track? Are you better than track? And what can you do? Right? Now with Industry 4.0 and with all the systems which we have in place, automation, chatbots, Autobots, and data, and companies which have invested in data, they can actually track performance in real time, and they can actually set goals on the system. So you don't have to manage Excel sheets, but you can actually see your performance monthly, fortnightly, or in weekly or daily. What happens with this is individuals are very clear what is expected out of them. They also know in real time, in most places, that how they can do it. please understand that finance and HR are yet not up there or are yet struggling to look at these real-time goals. But most operations functions, customer service, sales, these functions are able to do it because of data being available in real time. And because of this, decision making is also much better. Now, all of this performance management makes the organization very, very agile, which simply means that we can change goals much faster. We can coach, counsel, guide, and also help individuals through coaching, through collaboration, and through mentoring to set the right goals and also perform better. So in that way, the entire emphasis is now moving to execution, which I started in the beginning saying that, it is not about only being perfect, but it's also being doing the most appropriate thing at that point in time. And that is where execution comes in. So how different is contribution from performance? Performance generally deals with how well an individual is doing well. And, if I compare myself with my peers, am I better than my peers? Right? And they are either top down or bottom up, but generally when you measure performance, it's more individual in nature. And the individual may or may not know how he or she or them is making an impact to the individual. However, contribution clearly speaks about prioritizing the business need and clearly looking at bottom up and top down goal setting. The reason you do top down is because you set the purpose of the organization and you set the near term, mid term, and long term goals. And when I say long term, I'm saying 3 years now. I'm not saying 5 or 10 years. And you do bottom up because you're looking at, can I remove roadblocks? Can I invest more technology to make my teams more efficient? Basically, what I'm simply saying is the effort and endeavor which we are now trying to do is saying that if I'm reviewing you on a monthly basis, if there's a business review on a monthly basis, can performance not be indicated on a monthly basis? I'm not saying we'll review performance on a monthly basis, but I'm saying, can we have a performance measurement on a monthly basis? Can we have feedback which is monthly? And can we do reviews which are quarterly or half yearly or annually? Because reviewing performance of an individual monthly puts the individual a lot of pressure. But remember, sales has always been doing this. The sales guy's life has always been monthly, month end target, meter chalna. So why not other functions, right? So that is the thought process which I'm talking about. So with all of these changes comes to my thought process on what is going to happen in the future. So my belief is that performance management, goal setting, and performance assessment is going to become a little more complex than a normal MBO, BSc, OKR, or multiple of these tools. So the simple reason is that we're going to have bots at the workplace, we're going to have automated tools at the workplace, we're going to have diverse workforce in the workplace. For example, how many of us actually know how to actually measure people with special abilities who come into our company? How many of us actually know how to measure people who are ill and who yet come to work, right? We tend to actually only make it objective, but we forget that we're trying to measure human beings. And I generally smile a lot when a lot of people come and tell me that my performance management system should be highly objective. I think the role of performance management is not necessarily objective, but to be clear, to be transparent, to be human, and also to be both way feedback, where the individual also says, look, these targets are very tough. There's a very new concept which is coming out in the US, which talks about stand up for performance, which means you don't only accept goals because your boss told you to do it, but you accept goals which you think you can achieve, which is where motivation comes from. So I don't believe the objective of performance management is to be objective. It is to give clarity to the individual and to the leader and to the supervisor that are we all aligned to what we want to achieve. Please, you will realize that a lot of grievance in the company comes from goal settings not done properly, tick box activity, managers not spending time in setting goals because they don't understand it. Like I explained, because a lot of managers don't understand how their decisions impact the financial side of it, how their decisions impact prioritization, and hence there's always a there's always a fault line which exists between the manager and the employee in that one. Now with COVID happening, you will see a lot of digital transformation becoming the norm. Remote working, work from anywhere becoming the norm. I don't have the answer, but a lot of us are now thinking that in a new way, how do you manage performance? How do you measure productivity of the workforce? How do you measure white collar productivity? ये घर पे बैठ के काम ही कर रहा है कि कुछ और भी कर रहा है, right? Lot of new things which are coming up. How do you set goals in a virtual team? How do you set collaborative goals? Is it your performance or is it the bot's performance? A lot of these things are going to come up, right? So, and increasingly individuals are going to also say that, I have a firm belief that मैं 4 घंटे काम करूँ या 12 घंटे, आपको क्या फर्क पड़ता है? As long as I'm delivering what is expected. So performance management is going to shift from measuring time, effort. I believe that when you don't know what to measure, you measure time, effort, and it has to shift to measuring outcome within a set limit and a set period of time. If you're not able to call out the outcome, performance management goal setting will always, be subjective, not objective, and there will always be these grievances which keep coming. कि मुझे तो पता ही नहीं था कि मेरा परफॉर्मेंस अच्छा नहीं है, आप लास्ट मिनट कैसे बोल रहे हो, पूरा साल तो आपने बताया नहीं है, all of this. So we're clearly moving to a new way of performance in Industry 4.0, and because there's a lot of data available, I mean, if you use Microsoft today, there are a lot of tools which are coming in your mailbox which says that this is how you spent your last week on your mailbox, right? It's trying to show you, are you productive enough? Where have you spent your time? It's trying to give you a lot of these insights into your tools. So I will stop here for a minute. I think it was a one-way monologue. I have a few slides if you'll ask me questions on performance management tools, but this is more of a broad way of thinking from a practitioner's perspective. I'm not a big believer saying that, this tool is better or that tool is better. I believe whichever tool you use, whether it's OKR, BSC, MBO, and believe me, I believe that if you look at industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0, some of the companies will be between 3.0 and 4.0. Then you will have to have a mix of these tools. You cannot have one size fits all. For example, in manufacturing or in a BPO, I think MBO works brilliantly well. But as you go higher, BSc and OKRs work better. So I'm now talking about organizations which can have multiple tools to manage performance, to assess performance, to set goals, and it is to be fit to purpose, fit to culture, and what works well. It's not about having the best tool, it's having the most appropriate tool for that time, for the organization, which fits culturally. Hello.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm stopping at that just to, I think I've taken more than 45 minutes. I got carried away. So stopping at that just to see if there are any questions. Hi, Harini. So I'm happy to take any questions because in a short span of time, this is a huge subject, one of my favorite subjects.
Sir, I believe that you have explained it so well, so there should not be much questions. But still, in case anybody has, please unmute yourself and you can ask.
That's how we do it in town halls, right? Charles, you have any question on this?
No, not. I'm still absorbing.
I came in pretty late, but I wanted to be here because Jonathan happens to be a good friend of mine as well. So I wanted to be here. But I have a very quick question. So I don't know if you covered it, John, but it will be good to know that how do you create smart goals or smart objectives when the goals could be very, very intangible. I'm speaking very precisely from an HR practitioner's perspective. It's very difficult to create tangible goals for, let's say, an HR generalist. Even for a training and development person, it's possible to create tangible goals. It's very difficult to create tangible goals for an HR generalist. So, can you give some ideas, some examples?
Yeah. So sorry. So Harini, sorry to put you in the spot, but you asked me a question for which I have a slide ready. You know,
Okay.
And I just want to show HR practitioners, and this has been one of my favorite research areas in the last 3 years. When I went back to B school. So I went back to B school because as an HR professional, I had hit the ceiling on understanding performance, and I had not understood how finance valuations and whatever we read in the papers on, why are startups getting so much of valuation? Why are traditional companies struggling? And I think one of the critical reasons is objective goal setting or qualitative or great quality goal setting. So let me pull up that slide and explain to you that one of the critical aspects for an HR practitioner or somebody who's leading performance management, and that's what I do for a living now, and for a business leader as well, is to understand how do my actions contribute to the organization. And like you rightly point out, if I'm an HR generalist, how do I know, I'm contributing to the P&L? Now I put a one slide up to actually speak about all the functions, and I've used my favorite tool, which is a balance scorecard, but I can superimpose this to an MBO. I've not done a lot of work on OKRs, so I'll avoid that. But I'll use the balance scorecard methodology. Let me just bring up that slide and explain it to you all.
Fantastic. That would be good.
I hope you can see the slide.
Yes.
So what I've simply done is I've used the BSC methodology. And let me just answer the HR question first, which Harini asked. If I'm an HR generalist, how do I know I'm contributing to the P&L? Right? So if you look at my pointer, my laser pointer, what I've done is I have put the perspectives of BSC, financial, customer, internal process, and capacity and capability building, which means how do I make the organization scalable over a period of time? And what do I measure? So if I'm an HR generalist or I'm an HR specialist, very, very simple measures which come up at top of the mind recall is how well do I manage my workforce? Now, when I'm talking about workforce management, I'm not talking about cost. I'm talking about efficiency, productivity, alignment, and all of that. If your performance management system is working really well, and if you have clarity of goals, you will realize that your employees will contribute significant financial impact on the P&L, whether it's revenue, whether it's margins, and whether it's profits. And I will now draw in what we talk about employee engagement. Now, most of us talk about employee engagement, which is sitting in the customer experience here, right? Now, employee engagement is nothing but a mix of how well employees experience the company, what kind of rewards and recognition they get, what is the employee NPS, or if there's a great place to work score. Now, technically, if I'm doing that really well as a customer, if I'm treating my employees really well, we have a lot of research saying that any 1% improvement in engagement, I think translates to about 4 or 5% impact on the P&L. I think there's a lot of research around that, right? Which is nothing but saying that, can I put the right people on the right job? Can I give them a lot of clarity of what they're supposed to do? And can I do my reviews so regularly that they can focus. Now, the second one, which talks a lot about financial impact, and this is not an internal perspective, but I'll give you an external perspective, is that I don't know how many of you will invest in stocks, invest, you're in a listed company. If you ask any top fund manager or somebody who invests in stocks, that what do you look at when you invest in a company? And there will be two answers: product, service, how well they predict customer, how well they handle the customer. But the second most important one is quality of management. And that is one of the most important ones for sustaining a company over the long term, right? Now, quality of management doesn't show on the bottom line. However, if you look at succession planning in our companies, there's a lot of effort in succession planning, but does that effort translate into bottom line results, right? And that is where your performance management as an HR generalist has to translate, saying that, am I creating enough leaders that if one leader fails, another can take up that role? For example, if today a company loses a CEO, we all know that the company goes back 6 to 8 months in time because of a huge impact on culture and a lot of things. Similarly, when we hire externally, we get in a new person, that person takes 6 months to a year to perform because of understanding, acclimatization, adjustment, dealing with the boards, getting the network back. Succession planning in my head is very, very clear that it has to be translated to a bottom line result. Right? And I'm happy to be challenged on this, but this is the way I think, saying that if the person who's giving you capital thinks like this, your shareholder, why don't we think like that? Right?
So I would actually say, sorry to cut you short, but what I really want to highlight is these are all KPIs or performance indicators for HR folks, and that's something that I want everyone here in the audience to make note of. Many a time we assume that these are just HR processes, and we don't put them as part of our KRAs or targets or performance measures. But that's what this slide actually highlights brilliantly. So balance scorecard is something which I was just hoping you would bring forth, and I'm so glad you brought that. And another point which I really want to highlight to everybody here is that using a balance scorecard with all the different weightages is applicable to everybody at any level. It's only that the weightages would change depending on your role in the hierarchy of the organization. But I think this is an amazing example, John, and thanks a lot for this.
Right. So I think I've answered that question. Thank you.
Absolutely, brilliant.
I think I can give lectures on this.
Exactly.
Right. So in this way, you can actually convert. If you
Absolutely.
head to it, you can convert anything.
Correct.
Towards a PNL.
Correct.
And I don't say that the PNL is the be all and end all, but that's a very fair indicator of how well you're using capital.
Yes.
Capital and this goodwill.
Yes. Absolutely.
He measures capital, but goodwill is for management, quality of people, how well people stay with you. That's all goodwill.
Absolutely.
Goodwill. But everybody always remember, and we all now living in COVID times, you can look at everybody cutting cost, which is everybody talking about managing capital. Can I manage capital better? And there are some companies which will lose goodwill because of badly managing capital by cutting without thinking through the problem, right?
Okay,
So
well said.
valuation changes because the goal setting at the top tends to focus on capital now, not goodwill. And that is why a good organization will focus on both. So if you look at some of the recent emails coming from some of the top MDs who are cutting people, look at the communication. They're cutting people, they're managing capital, but they're also managing stakeholders. They're managing their internal people with some great communication. I think people spoke about Zomato yesterday. I think before that it was Airbnb, if I'm not mistaken. So some great communication coming out. Now that is managing goodwill. And both are part of, like I said, one is managing the current, but also looking towards the future. Because you have to manage the current, else there will not be a future. But you cannot damage the current so that you have no future. So they're both. So a lot of these good top leaders, they're trying to manage both. And you're seeing some great communication happening in tough times.
Absolutely. Thanks for that response. Paresh, do we have any questions? Any more questions? Or if you would permit me, I would want to wind up with a very, very small story for everybody.
This is my favorite slide as we wind up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be honest, my last comment on this is that, I started working on Balance Scorecard maybe in 2006-7, but I only understood the Balance Scorecard only in 2016-17 in the real sense.
Right. So the chair has given me permission to go ahead with a very small story, which I felt is very relevant in this context. And because I was not there at the start, I thought let us close with that on a high note as we're already in part of the weekend. So the story goes like this. There's a boy who he's asking his father that at breakfast table, he's asking his father, can you tell me what is the difference between contribution and commitment? Because in the context of managing performance, we're all the time talking about how committed I was to my role, and the company is only looking at what has been my contribution to it. So we always keep evaluating ourselves based on a commitment and contribution. So this boy asked this question to his father at the breakfast table. And sorry, only non-veg eaters can understand the story fully, but still I would never listen. But so the father says that, okay, you look at what you're having for breakfast. He says you're having egg and you're having ham. So he says the egg is actually the contribution given by the chicken to your breakfast, and the ham is the commitment given by the pig. So in the context of, so whenever we have a debate in our mind saying, I have been committing myself so much to the organization, but the organization is constantly trying to evaluate my contribution, I think every one of us has to remember the story. So when you're talking about commitment, it means that you're giving your full self to the organization. And when you're giving your contribution, it only means that you're giving a part of you to the organization. So when you're saying that you've been giving your commitment to the organization, just take a step back and evaluate yourself, whether it's a commitment or a contribution. So when you're writing your goals or when you're setting your KRAs for the coming year or for the next quarter or whatever, try to see if you're able to articulate that as good as a commitment, which means wear the entrepreneur's hat for your organization, pretend you're the CEO, and use the balance scorecard, because everybody has a stake to play, right from the financial to the customer experience, no matter what your role is. So then it would become a commitment. If you restrict yourself saying I'm an HR person and I don't care what happens to the financials, I don't care what happens to the product in the market, I don't really care what happens to how you do the selling, I think then you would only be doing your contribution and not your commitment. So I just wanted to wind up with this story, letting everyone know the difference between contribution and commitment, and that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Harini, for this.
Hi, Shefali. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you. And thank you so much, Mr. D'Souza, for your discussion was so